Okay, good morning, folks. Good morning, dads. Good morning, listeners. We are blessed today to have Chris Budd with us. Chris is the author of the Financial Wellbeing book. He's also an author of several novels. Chris is part of or the founder of Ovation Financial Planning, and he heads up the Financial Wellbeing podcast. So this podcast today is again going to be about money, dads and their money, um, and hopefully a strong theme of well-being. Chris is an esteemed character, keen cricketer. Um, I haven't known Chris that long, but I already get a sense that he's kind. He has a generous energy. He's come recommended, so really knows his stuff. And yeah, I'm just delighted to have him here, really. So good morning, Chris.
Bloomin' egg, how do I follow that?
Good luck, bud.
Yeah.
Chris, just so we can hear your voice for a few minutes, hopefully mostly your voice for this period of time. Can you give us a whistle-stop tour of your kind of background and how we've got to present day? Can we start there, please?
Sure. Always tickles me when you do a bit of networking, you have a coffee with somebody and say, tell me about yourself. And for 20 minutes, they start off, well, when I left school, oh God, I won't do that, I promise. So I spent my career in financial planning. I sold my business, the Ovation Financial, a majority of it to Employee Ownership Trust, a subject we might return to. But I also have an interest in happiness, really, and what makes us happy, what gives well-being. I think it's a little bit informed by the fact that my wife, who we met when I was in my early 20s, is a cancer nurse. And that brings in a perspective on life. We've always been around death. And that brings a perspective on life, but also a life of financial planning as well. I got fed up with no, actually, I'll tell you a very quick story. There's a PA, Sarah, I will name it, Sarah Brown. She was my PA for many, many years. And then one day she resigned to move on, which was fine. And I just said to her an exit interview, said, what's prompted this? And she said, I don't know. I just don't want to help rich people to get richer. And that really stung, because that wasn't what I was about, but it was what I was doing. And so it really niggled at me. And so I ended up writing this book called the Financial Wellbeing book. I just use a quick joke with you on here, Ben. I wrote it about 5 years ago. And I like to claim that I actually invented the term financial well-being. Because when I thought of the title for the book, I made up the name. I just didn't know that two other people invented it before me. Because when I Googled it, I did find there were only two other entries. So I still like to claim I invented the phrase financial well-being. It's not actually true, but yeah. But since when has that actually mattered?
Great. So sold a practice, yeah, but a large part of our demographic are going to be business owners, Chris. So we'd be grateful for you sharing some of your insight, knowledge, wisdom in that. Having built and sold a business, that's no small thing. Yeah. So money, the topic of money, the person exiting your company because you didn't want to make rich people richer, the stigmas around money, the way men feel about money, what we make money mean. Um, can we keep the topic on you for now? What has your relationship with money looked like? Has it always, I'm assuming it's good now, focusing on happiness too. How has your relationship with money always been the way it's been today?
No, I think my relationship to money was very much informed by what happened to my father. My father was a financial advisor, and he was what we might call an old school financial advisor these days, although back in those days it was the only way of doing it, which was every month you had to find somebody new to sell an investment or a policy to earn the commission to pay your bills. And back in the 80s and 90s, that was what everybody did. The trouble is, in the early 90s, and things went very well for a few years. In the early 90s, they didn't go so well. Then he ended up going bankrupt and lost his house.
Right.
And I was very closely involved with that whole process, giving him some money to keep the mortgage going while we tried to keep it alive. Eventually failed in that process. But what I learned from that is that I would never want to be a victim of life. That was a phrase that came to me. And I realized that when things went well for my dad, he bought a Jag. It was a secondhand, quite an old Jag, but he still bought a Jag because that's something that he wanted. And that just wasn't me.
Mm.
And I just realized that by chasing these things that weren't really me, I was setting myself up for a fall to be a victim like my dad.
Mm.
So I love my dad dearly, and I'm very proud of him. He passed away a few years ago, but I've learned a lot of things about what I do by not doing what he did.
Mm. Mm.
I never put it quite that way to him,
Sure.
but it made me just sit down and work out, well, what actually is it that's going to make me happy in life, and how can I use my money to achieve that?
Mm. You've just introduced the idea. It's a theme that's coming out of our series recently, is money being a supporting vehicle to help you build the life you want.
Hmm.
Culture, ideology, don't know if his ideology is the right word, but money defines who you are, not money supports the lifestyle you want to create, because what that implies immediately, the antithesis of victimhood is responsibility. I'm responsible for choosing what kind of life I want to build, and the adult level approach is to identify and go about generating the resources required to build that lifestyle, and money just being a resource to facilitate that, rather than money says something about and everything about who I am, which runs, in my experience, deeper for men than it does women. Not that we need to classify sex here, but
Yeah, look, I've done a lot of research. So we've got 70 odd plus podcasts of the Financial Wellbeing Podcast. I've written a book. I've set up an institute. A lot of my working day is reading and studying stuff about money and happiness. And I'm going to just quote actually a film I watched last night, which is called Afterlife. It's a Japanese film, typical Japanese film, very slow, very ponderous, absolutely beautiful. And if you'll allow me, I just want to describe this film because I think it probably plays into what you're talking about. The idea of the film is that there is a kind of dilapidated school with some counselors in it, and when we die, we go to this school and we get counseled. Okay, so this is the afterlife, and what they do, these counselors, is they say you have to pick one memory from your life. You've got 3 days to pick that memory. Once you've told us what memory it is, we will then recreate that memory with you in it. And then you will go on to the next place and you'll forget everything else except that one memory. And what a fascinating setup that is. So
mm,
through the film, they interview the people. Some of them are actually people who are just generally not actors, just telling their memories. And it's incredibly moving and very powerful. But what really struck me, what the relevance was at the end, there's one guy, for example, who talked for 3 days about all the women he'd had sex with. And then eventually he chose when he went on holiday with his wife, because that's the memory he actually wanted to take with him. And the other memories that people chose as the one memory you could have forever was somebody who sat on a park bench with his fiancée just before going off to war.
mm,
An old lady who talked about a red dress that her brother bought her when she was in her late teens, taking her to a dance. Another person, an old lady, talked about the falling of the cherry blossom. It wasn't about when I drove down the road in a big car and everybody looked at me with jealousy. You know, it wasn't about when I went to a networking event and told everybody how busy I was, which is actually a lie. It wasn't any of the material stuff. It was the little fleeting moments of happiness and joy.
mm.
And that is, therefore, should we not be directing our attention and our efforts into these things in life? That's what gives us well-being. And you've touched on it yourself. Money is a tool to enable this to happen, and that's all it is. And if we see it as anything else, there's lots of research out there which shows that if you are a person who sees materialistic goods as an objective, if you see money as an objective, you will be less happy than you would otherwise be. There's lots of research that shows that. So it's about understanding the role that money has in your life, your relationship to money, how we are being hammered at all sides to see money in a negative way, advertising, trying to make you feel unhappy so that they can sell you a product to make you back up to happiness again, that kind of stuff. Once you're awake to all of this stuff, you can start to ignore it, and you can start to focus on the fleeting moments of life and making sure you get as many of those into your belt as you possibly can.
When Kerry and I married. I'm so lucky that I've got a wife that is not a stickler for our anniversary. I'm more likely to remember the date and time than she is. Um, we're looking at 9 years, I'm quite sure, this year. And when we sit down to review budget and forecast budget together, the primary objective is unity and connection. Now, and the secondary outcome is hopefully the numbers match up and the numbers are in the right places and the numbers are working in the way that we were hoping they would. But it's a well-being process that we're both involved, we're both accountable for, and because we're doing it together, that experience far and away outweighs what the numbers actually say. That for me is part of a financial well-being process that we're doing it together.
Mm.
um, when you mentioned, Chris, the movie you watched last night, what actually matters, what really counts. This is fascinating to hear from a guy that has made a lot of wealthy people more wealthy and sold a practice. Um, how, what was the turning point for you? I mentioned just before we started recording here, I lost a truckload of money that I could not afford to lose. I mean, truth is, no one really ever wants to lose money. But the day that Kerry looked in my eyes and said, I just want you to love me. I don't care how much you've lost and how much we haven't got. That for me was like a, you matter. You've got nothing, by the way, right now, Ben. You matter. And I want you to love me way more than I want you to be successful and wealthy and provide for me. And that was a turning point that I'll never forget. What was Chris's turning point of, and you perhaps have alluded to one already, of I really want to know what matters. I really want to study what matters.
There's quite a few, but one that sticks in my mind. I struggled very early on with my business. It was a really hard first few years, and everybody in Ovation Finance knows the story of my dry toast. When I had to have dry toast for lunch, so I couldn't afford to go out to the shops and get anything on it. I had to leave shopping in the supermarket because my credit card had maxed out. You know, all of those awful moments. And then the day came when I thought, you know what, I think I'm going to be okay. I think this business is going to be all right. Because I was working on retained clients rather than selling products and fees and all that kind of stuff before it was even thought of by most people. And it was about 5 years, and I sat down with my wife and I said, right, I think the business is okay, but I've now got to decide how to move forward. I can either work quite hard, very hard. I could probably do 6 days a week. I could be home at 7 o'clock at night to tuck the kids into bed, pop into the office for half a day on a Saturday, what have you, and I think we could be quite rich. I think actually, do you know what? I think I could end up building quite a big business and we could be rich. Or I could work 9 to 5 or whatever time, you know, but be back in time to sit down with the kids and have tea, take them to school a couple of times a week, never work weekends. And I think we'll be okay. Which do you want me to do? And without a second's thought, it was the latter, without even thinking about it. And that gave me permission to be happy. You know, I think permission is a fascinating subject, by the way, or one we might want to come back to. But that gave me the permission to say, this is what we want from life. And we agreed a shared goal in that moment, rather than, and it was such an important thing to have talked about. The other thing, she's been right on so many bloody occasions, my wife, you know, when you kind of ignore it for years and then you look back and yeah, she was right all along again. She would always say to me, when you're going to sell the business? And I say, I don't plan to ever sell the business, because why would I want to do that? I love my business. I'm setting it up for a job for life, etc., etc. And she would say, yeah, but isn't the point of setting up a business to sell it? I thought that's why people did business. No, you don't understand. You don't understand. It turns out we were kind of both right, because I didn't ever actually want to sell the business at all. I wanted to see it continue, but I didn't want to be in it. So another moment, which is a massive moment of change for me in my life. I'll tell you a quick story here, if I may, Ben. and my relationship to money. I was suffering from what the GP called a muzzy head. I think we could call it mild depression. Okay, because one of the things about being a business owner, a lot of friends would say, "Oh, you're so lucky owning your own business because you have so much freedom and flexibility," and it's actually completely the opposite. Owning a small business is being trapped. You can't. I can't just resign and go and get a different job. I've invested too much money, time, and effort into this thing. And yet I also can't sell it because it's all about me. Oh shit, I'm trapped. And that was really getting me down. So I went to the GP and I explained my symptoms of muzzy head, and she was a bit perturbed because she didn't have any pills to give me for that. So she said, well, let's do some tests. So she did some tests, and I went back a few weeks later for the blood test results. She said, good news, we've done the blood test and there's nothing wrong with you. And she kind of turned to the door for me to leave. And I said, well, but there is, because I've still got this muzzy head. And she kind of looked perturbed again because she was feeling, nothing to no pill set. And I said, well, I've looked on the internet, those words every GP hates to hear. I've had a look on the internet and there's a suggestion it might be stress or depression. So that perked her up because she had some pills for that. So what she said, look, here's a questionnaire, take this home, fill it in, bring it back in 2 weeks' time, and we'll have another chat. So I go home, and a moment I will never forget as long as I live. I sit at the kitchen table, and when you're at school, they've photocopied a test about 58 times, and it's a bit faded and skewy on the page. It's like that, one of those. And it headed up depression questionnaire. And the first question it said was, how many times a week do you feel like killing yourself? And I was supposed to fill this in and take it back 2 weeks later. So I pretty quickly realized that conventional medicine wasn't going to do me much good. So I did two things as a result of this. I firstly went and got business coaching. A friend of mine was training to be a coach. She said, would you be a guinea pig? I was like, oh yeah, that's a lot of old rubbish, but yeah, all right, as a favor to you. Changed my life. 3 sessions, changed my life. Because it led to the second thing, because I realized through that business coaching that the thing that I wasn't doing that was causing me stress was writing fiction, writing novels. And so from that day, I took Wednesdays off for writing. I still don't work on a Wednesday. That is my writing day. I've published 2 novels. I'm about to publish a 3rd novel. Everything on Amazon, people. ABC, always be closing. To type my name into Amazon and all my books are on there. But it doesn't actually matter that much how many novels I sell. It's nice to sell a few novels and people like them. It's actually about the intellectual process. Yeah, the intellectual process of working it through. So those were the 2 big moments in life when my wife said, well, let's be comfortable. Let's not worry about Rich, because I want you here with my kids. And the second one was me saying to myself, there's something in life I'm not doing that I really need to do.
So nice to have an intentional pause, because you will be opening the paradigm of lots of listeners who might have been conditioned to have very fixed ideas about money and what life should look like, who they should be as a man, who they should be as a father. And we're touching on subjects here of how we've had affirmed to us that you matter, your presence matters, your availability is the most important thing to us. And I just see so many men trapped in that idea of, no, I must provide. That's my main job in life, and I must do that perfectly, and I must do that really well. And the painful part of that really is, who is that about? Who is that about? Who's it for?
So let me talk about motivations for a minute, because this is a big part of financial well-being theory. Because I think this does play into what you've just said, Ben. There are 2 types of reasons why we do things. This is a little simplistic, but it's taking some theory and applying it. 2 types of reasons why we do things. We have intrinsic and extrinsic motivations. Okay. Now, an extrinsic motivation is something that you do for an extrinsic reward. So it could be a financial reward, it could be achieving a particular goal, it could be status, it could be as a result of a deadline, carrot or stick. but it's about somebody else. The other reason for doing things is called an intrinsic motivation, and there isn't particularly a reason why you do that. You just want to. You might find it hard to articulate why it is you do a certain thing. You just want to do it, and that's called an intrinsic motivation. And there's a guy called Professor Knox. I can't remember which one of our podcasts that he's on. He's absolutely brilliant, this guy, because he explains that his research shows that if you achieve an extrinsic motivation, that doesn't increase your well-being. But if you achieve an intrinsic motivation, it does. So if your life is all about making other people happy, that will not be making you happy. It won't make any difference. It won't make you unhappy either, just won't make any difference. But if your life is about meaning and purpose, about intrinsic motivations, that will be. Now, there is a bit of a kicker to this, however, because there's a behavioral finance thing called loss aversion. It's about how if we lose, so imagine you lose your wallet, right? How annoying is that? I lost a wallet, I had to do all my cards, blah, blah, blah. What a pain in the backside. Really annoying. Now imagine how much you feel happiness when you find your wallet again. It's not equivalent. Nowhere near equivalent. You don't feel anything like it's happy when you find it as you did when you lost it.
As sad as you did when you lost it, yes.
Yeah. As sad as you did when you lost it. So loss aversion is all about how much we don't. And studies don't like losing things. And studies show that we actually feel a loss 3.7 times more than the equivalent gain. Now, if we put that back to our motivations, if you are trying to heading towards an intrinsic motivation, you fail to achieve it, it'll actually make you 3.7 times more unhappy than if you achieved it. So what we need to be looking for in life is achievable intrinsic motivations.
So the experience of what you witnessed with your father's business and our fathers ahead of us just have such an impact on what we make of the world, what we perceived our journey to be about, what the purpose of it all is. Your father's, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, your father's attempts to do his absolute best were extrinsic motivation of building a successful business, a wealthy business, which, and I don't know exactly what the rest of the story is there, but his story sounds different to you had a chat with your wife and you said, we can go wealthy or we can just go good. And you and your wife chose, you matter more. Let's just go good, because the super wealthy, there won't be much of you left.
Yeah, and one of the big differences between my dad's story and mine is that I talked to my wife. He never talked to my mum. They never set agreed goals, agreed objectives, agreed motivations. And in fact, he also never talked to her when things went wrong. That was his biggest mistake. He thought he wanted to shield her from it, not realizing that by doing so, he was excluding her from it. And that was a real problem for a very, very long time for her. And I can understand why. My dad's motivations were perfectly honorable and good. He thought, he should be able to deal with it, but he couldn't. The outcome to the story was that he lost his house, lost everything, and he was never the same man again. That's the honest truth of it. And it was because he was chasing what he thought he should be chasing, rather than sitting down, thinking about it, discussing it with my mum, and saying, what actually is it that we want from life? What will make us happy? And that's one of the things that I do with the Initiative for Financial Wellbeing, is we work with financial advisors, helping them to help their clients to be happier, not just wealthier. That's the phrase that we use. Unfortunately, there's not many that do that, but we're getting to them one at a time.
Yes, there's this old notion of this strong, cut to pieces leader, like the Braveheart, who's still going, who wants to sacrifice his life, like gets this badge of nobility for being out at the front, doing it on his own, leading us all to war. That's the idea. And in my own research, a lot of Jim Collins reading, Good to Great, teaches us this. The leader who leverages, uses, incorporates, includes everybody in the company objective and the company vision, and does that from it in the heart of it all, rather than being this old idea that I was certainly raised with, that Ben needs to be at the front, Ben needs to be the leader. Sure, there's a place for that. There's a place for leadership in my home to a degree, but Kerry and I we're a team, have to be a team. And some of the dads listening out there might hear this as well. I'm a single dad, so and I'd love to hand that question to you, Chris, for the single dads out there that haven't got a teammate in a sense like you and I have had the blessing of. How would they go about building a more financial well-being?
So there's so many things to say, but and I'm always very loath. I'm a business coach, amongst other things, and one of the things you talk to business coaches, never tell somebody what to do, because that's based upon your values, not theirs. So the first thing that I would say to them is work out your values, work out what it is that you actually want from life, what makes you happy, what is important to you, what are your values, what are the lines you don't want to cross, and that kind of stuff. Do some thinking about that. I think, just going back to your leadership point, the best leaders are role models. Show, don't tell. The best leaders are role models, and I want to be like them. Not they've just told me what to do, so I'll do it. This comes back to the day job that I do, if you like, if I can call it that way, working with companies on succession planning, and particularly sale to an employee ownership trust, which is what I did with Ovation. Because if you're an employee-owned business, there isn't a boss, there isn't an owner, there isn't somebody in charge, and therefore you have to create an environment where everybody gets involved and makes decisions. I'm not going to suggest whether I was a good parent or not, that's for others to judge, but one of the things that I was really strong in doing was getting my kids to think for themselves. So, for example, we would go to London when they were little, go for a day trip, and I would set each of them a task. Right, we're at Paddington now. We've got to get to Piccadilly. Where do we go? We're all following you. It's like age of 7, and they had to work it out. The other thing I would always do as well is, as a coach, one of the things you do is, you don't give answers, you ask questions. And my daughter one day, I always remember this, she was 14 at the time. And she said, "Dad, you're really annoying." And I said, "Oh, sorry about that, darling. I don't try and be. How am I really going to?" Well, because all you ever do is ask me questions, and I'll ask you a question. You don't give me an answer. It's really annoying. And I said, "Oh dear, right. What it is you think I'm trying to do when I do that?" And she said, "Well, you're trying to get me to think for myself." "Oh, you've done it again!" Oh, true story, that actually happened. My daughter moved home to Brighton recently at the age of 20, and she hasn't got a job. She found herself a job, she found herself a flat, she got herself a car, and just told us about it all. So maybe it did all work in the end.
I love that. We live just outside the Forest of Dean, so we regularly take walks deep into the murky darks of the forest. And I say, right, not telling you how we got here is your job back out of the woods. And I find it difficult to not pitch in, because who's that about? That's about me wanting to feel like I'm the hero. So just really grateful you've just tagged in some parenting help for us,
Well,
Chris.
I can't stress, I'm not a single dad. I can't imagine how hard that must be, especially during COVID, etc. So I'm not going to preach to anybody about whether they're doing things right or not. All I can share is things that have worked for me.
And yeah, I'm so grateful you mentioned that, because ultimately, heart goes out to any single parent, male or female, right now. It's hard, right? It really is harder for a certain set of people than it is for another set of people. We're not all in the same boat for that very reason. Yet, good, sound principles, keep it on topic here, around money apply to everyone across the board. A good principle applies in 10,000 years ago to what it applies right now in 10,000 years in the future. So, can we just touch on that for a moment, Chris? Because I do want to get onto the employee owned business idea, because that's something that's been introduced to me recently, and love the ethics and idea around that. So, let's say we've got two guys, right? We've got two men. One budgets seems to have a lot of things going wrong. Is a low income family, let's say, and they're often below break even for the month. So they're not borrowing a huge amount to top up, but they are at least managing funds to a degree. Um, that's Bob, number one. Let's take Gary, number two. Gary doesn't budget, earns a lot, spends a lot, and works a lot. Of these two men, who would you see has a better handle on financial well-being?
Well,
Take that information wherever you like, by the way.
yeah, I would argue neither of them. But I would also argue that there's not enough information because I don't know what makes them happy and what gives them purpose and meaning in life. So if the jobs that they are doing are boring, mundane jobs that don't give them any sense of purpose, that's probably a bigger contributor to anything else than anything else. One of the So there's 5 planks to financial well-being, and the first of them is having a clear path to identifiable objectives. And if we drill down a little bit on those identifiable objectives, we're really talking those achievable intrinsic motivations I mentioned earlier. So having a clear path to identifiable objectives. Another line that we use all the time is financial planning is really very simple. Just work out what you want from life and spend your money on that. Now, neither of those two sounded like they worked out what they wanted from life. Neither Bob or Gary sounded like they worked out what they wanted from life. They're just going through life rudderless. That is far more important than that. That will direct to how you spend your money. Look, budgeting may or may not be important. I've never budgeted in my entire life. I'm far more like Gary than I am Bob, and yet I've been a financial advisor. I'm from the don't do as I do as I say school of financial planning. But it's kind of worked for me because I'll go out and work and get some more money in if I need to, you know. But that doesn't mean it's right. But that's who I am. So it's more about the achievable intrinsic motivations and working out what makes you happy. Because one of the exercises we do some workplace stuff, and one of the exercises we do is we say to people, "What's your sustainable income and what's your disposable income?" In other words, how much money do you have to have in order to have a happy life? We'll include a holiday in that when we can do such things. How much is extra? Hopefully there will be some extra, not always, but hopefully there will be a bit extra. And that extra is used then for wealth creation, for bringing the future closer, that kind of stuff. Then we go through an exercise of, well, what is that future that you like to have? Let's try and envisage that. In 5 years' time, what is your life like in an ideal world? And when you go through that kind of exercise, we then go back to the beginning and say, right, now let's review your spending and what you said was sustainable income. And it's amazing how often the amount I needed actually has just gone down a bit because I don't actually need to be spending it on that 5th guitar or whatever it might be. Personal anecdote there. I don't actually need to buy another guitar. What I would really like is to know that I could have that trip to Japan in 3 years' time. So maybe I'll be putting my money to. So once you envisage your future and spend your time on your intrinsic motivations, suddenly your spending review, your budgeting is a whole different exercise.
The idea around saving pops up here that if you never put any money aside to save, you'll never have enough money to save, or something like that. And what you keep bringing us back to here, Chris, is taking the focus off of money. So it's a contradiction in a sense here because the topic is money. You're suggesting the start point is where are you going? Where are you heading?
Where you want to head.
Where do you want to go?
And that doesn't need to be huge things. It doesn't. By the way, it's also not bucket list things either. It's not. I want to, go across America or what have you. Those things are okay. And there's nothing wrong with having goals, bucket list type goal. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about meaning and purpose, finding meaning and purpose. Age Concern did a survey recently of people in retirement and asked them what was giving them well-being. And the people who reported the highest well-being are those who said that they were living a meaningful existence. moving into retirement is a complicated area in itself. Selling a business is a complicated area because you're a really important person and suddenly you're just not. Suddenly you have meaning and mastery over what you do, and then suddenly you don't. So planning into retirement isn't about have I got enough money? It's about, well, I don't know. What is it you want to do? Who are you going to be? These are the sorts of questions that you need to be answering if you know how you can then use money to achieve that. Money is a tool and nothing more.
Mm. Before we hop on the topic of employee-owned business, you alluded to, Chris, if you need to go and make a bit of bank temporarily, you just crack on and do that. I speak to men who haven't got that level of confidence. Um, can you just tell us a bit more about that?
It's a really difficult one, Ben, because um, I want to be a bit hard line on this, but I
Please
know
do.
it's not fair. Well, I know it's not fair, but so please, I'm going to be hard line, but forgive
Let's
me
do hardline. Yep.
if I can put it that way. Um, I'm not saying this because I want to keep plugging our podcast, but there was another guest on our podcast, a lady called Maria Nadeva, and she discovered that her husband had racked up £100,000 of debt that she didn't know about. She paid it all off in 2 years. And her story is absolutely fascinating. Now, you should get her on this podcast, Ben. She's a force of nature, is Maria. She's hilarious. But she paid that off in 2 years.
Mm.
And one of the things that she said that, and so she's written the book and she talks about how she achieved that. And one of the things that she said that really, really resonated with me is that I said, what was the smallest amount that you paid off? And it was something like £4.20. It was discipline. It was discipline about, she was so determined to get that money paid off. She went and got extra jobs, washing up, meaningless jobs, just to get, because she was so determined to get that paid off.
Mm.
So the hardline answer to your question is, really, is there actually nothing else you can do? I know that that's so difficult to say because there may be people who really, really, really can't do anything else. But, I guess that's, yeah, like I say, forgive me for taking a hard line, but I think it's probably got some validity.
For me, it comes back to there is choice here. Your victim idea is choiceless. The rich man's idea is possibility and choices. So we might not like the choices we have, but there's always choice. And I
Mm.
heard Dave Ramsey say the other day something like, my grandmother used to say that when you're broke, there's a great place to go, and it's called to work.
Yeah, well, that assumes there are jobs around, and there are some caveats. But at the end of the day, are they excuses or are they reasons? And there may be good reasons, but yeah, end of the day.
End of the day, there are you're looking over opportunities to add value to other people's lives. If you add value to other people's lives, or you help enough people get what they want, eventually get what you want. It's impossible to go and add value and get focus off of yourself and focus on what other people you need and how you can contribute to somebody else's life. Ultimately, one of the byproducts or consequences of that will be money. You don't have to do stuff for money. You can do stuff voluntarily, but if you're in a bind, let's get out to work. Let's take that Chris's hard line. It'll
Yeah.
put hairs on your chest and make a character of you.
And look, I talk about intrinsic motivations. There is no bigger intrinsic motivation than being a parent.
Mm.
You don't think, if let's be honest, if we thought about and weighed up the pros and cons of being a parent, we might not actually do it. Look how much it costs you. But you do it because of the extraordinary meaning and purpose it brings to your life. So if you've got to go and do a job you really don't want to do to bring in some money, your intrinsic motivation is your family. There isn't any bigger one than that.
Values, goals, objectives first before the money. Put your rudder on. Put your rudder on. Where are we heading? Chris, can you please share with us this idea? Teach us some around employee-owned business. that's new for me. So the look on my face will be obvious to see how I'm responding to it. But please just share a bit of that with us.
Sure. Look, very, very briefly, if you know how John Lewis is owned, that's your shortcut. So John Lewis is owned by a trust fund. What happens is when John Lewis makes profit, hopefully it will again, that profit goes to the trust fund and is then distributed amongst all their employees. They call their employees partners. They're not actually partners in the firm, but they are what we call an indirect owner in the firm, because the employees are beneficiaries of a trust fund, and the trust fund owns John Lewis. That's exactly what the Employee Ownership Trust is, the EOT. It's only been out for a few years, 2014. So that's why it's not that well known just yet. But if you're a business owner and you're thinking about selling, and you want to get out of your business, you want to move on, whatever reason, the EOT may just be the perfect exit route. When I was looking at selling the majority of Ovation Finance, the options were pretty rubbish, really. I didn't have a management team that could buy out. I didn't have the money. And I didn't want to sell to a third party and see my business just kind of ripped apart and employees sacked and what have you. So I was trapped. I didn't know what to do. And when I discovered the EOT, it was an absolute life changer, absolute life changer. So I sold a majority to an EOT. I wrote a book about it called The Eternal Business. What's really, really, really important here, okay, is it is the perfect exit for the right business. The right business being one where the owner really does want to see it continue. If you don't actually care about it continuing, then that's absolutely fine. Trade sale is great. But if you do want to see it continue beyond you and kind of leave a legacy, an EOT business does need preparation, because you get paid from the future profit of the business, which is kind of the same for any trade sale. The difference here is you get to prepare the business and maybe even continue being on the board or what have you, being involved as it pays you out. So the work that I do is helping companies with the transition of their business, getting it ready. If you are, the phrase that we use is we help owners to become the least important person in their business. Because if you're the most important person, you can't sell, you can't leave. So you have to be the least important person, so that one day you can just not come in, nobody notices, and you'll get paid for the value of the business. So if anybody wants to know more, get in touch with me. Can I make a plea? If anybody wants to know more, don't go and talk to your accountant or solicitor. They are not the place to give you information about this. They will talk to you in terms of tax and in terms of legals. This is not about tax and legals. It's about getting your business ready and making sure it's right for you. So go and talk to an expert in employee ownership trust, and I'm delighted to say that I'm one of them.
Being a businessman for as long as I have been, I would never call myself a businessman, but I understand sales. I understand helping meet someone's need with a product you or someone you know has. And what I've heard is, and what I deal with people being afraid of here is the idea of being sold to. What I refer to it as is you're gathering information. That's what I hear you saying is just let's gather this piece of information first. Of course, go and speak to your solicitor and your accountant or whoever. Let's just make this the first step. There's no sale here. Gonna just give you some information for you to look at things a different way, which is essentially what you've done this whole interview, Chris, is we've taken the idea of money, the subject of money, the topic of money, and you've pulled men's heartstrings into, well, what is it, where do you want to head, what do you want to build and create? And it's not a classic coach's line. Money is a tool to support you. It's not a tool to detract from you, as a tool to support where you want to head. And for those of you that are blessed enough to have a partner to discuss this stuff, all the better for you. And if you're single, we know that there are financial institutions out there that will be able to just even a coach will be able to help you bat some ideas around to help you have someone else to talk to about your financial challenges or financial future.
Can I just pick up on one little thing there, Ben?
Please.
One of the key messages here is for everybody to work out what is right for them. And there's a line that you used, which is probably reveals a little about your attitude to life, because you said, work out what it is that you want to build and create, because you're a builder and a creator. Mm-hmm. But there are other people out there who aren't, for them, that phrase might be a bit scary, actually. what am I supposed to build? I don't want to build anything. I just want to be with my family and be happy. That's cool too. Work out what is right for you. And if that means that I want to set up a business because I want to make money, okay. If I want to set up a business because it's really purpose driven, I want to see it continue, that's cool. I set up a business because somebody kind of asked me to, and they were a partner and then they left, and I don't know what to do. All I want to do is go on my bike. That's cool too. Work out what it is that makes you happy, your intrinsic motivations, and then spend your time on that.
Perfect. Really grateful, Chris. Thank you so much for your time. Would you be willing to just, I'll put the info in the bio notes anyway, just point us one more time in the direction of where people can head if they want to find out a bit more about you and what you do and anything you've mentioned.
That's very kind. So theeternalbusiness.com if you're interested in employee ownership. If you're interested in financial well-being, then probably the podcast, Financial Wellbeing Podcast. We do have a website as well. And if anybody is interested in financial planning that is really about helping them to achieve a life that they want, then Ovation Finance is the place to go for that. And there's a website for that in Bristol. Drop them an email and just tell them that you heard them on this podcast.
Thanks, Chris. Really grateful for your time, bud. Have a great day.
Appreciate it very much, Ben. Thank you.
I'll see you again. Bye-bye.